And on we go back to the popular sphere here, talking a little bit about Beach Boys from just outside of LA. Specifically, their album Smiley Smile in 1966 featured a couple songs. One, She's Going Bald. It had the use of something called a tempo phone for pitch shifting, without shifting speed. And Good Vibrations, a piece you all have probably heard at some point in your life, and its use of something called the electrotheremin, not actually the theremin, like many people think. It sounds just like the theremin, but it's played a little bit differently. Instead of the antenna, there's something else going on, and it actually makes it a little bit easier to play because it's a little easier to find the notes, unlike on the theremin. So take a listen to the excerpts from She's Going Bald and Good Vibrations. Moving along, we'll talk now for a moment about Grateful Dead from San Francisco and their album Anthem of the Sun from 1968. Specifically, there's a piece on there that we'll have a little excerpt to listen to called That's It for the Other One, parts 1 through 4. Now, this song, as well as other songs on this album, were sort of a great big studio experiment in splicing together studio versions of the songs and improvisational moments from live versions, multiple live versions all spliced together to create one song. In addition, this particular song, That's It for the Other One, makes use of many types of tape manipulations, panning, echo, speeding things up, all of that sort of stuff happen at this sort of musique concrète type moment at the end of this particular song on the album. So listen to the excerpt there and come back. We will talk a bit about the Beatles next. So here we are, the Beatles from Liverpool. Specifically, I want you to just take a listen to the excerpt of Strawberry Fields Forever. I'm sure most of you have heard this before, but the opening there makes use of the Mellotron, which we talked about a little bit earlier. Additionally, there'll be a little excerpt of Revolution 9, a piece off of the White Album from 1968. And this is essentially a musique concrète piece. They took reels of tape that were lying around in the studio from engineers and testers who were testing equipment and that sort of stuff, and they just made this collage of sounds out of this stuff, and again used the studio as sort of an instrument, a way to create. All right, and now we will end on Frank Zappa from LA. And we're going to talk a little bit about this piece, Absolutely Free, from 1968, the album We're Only in It for the Money, with Frank Zappa and the Mothers of Invention. Again, tape manipulations using the studio as an instrument are noticeable here, specifically dealing with speed and pitch, speeding things up, and thereby they get repitched, panning, delay, echo, all of that sort of stuff as well. And then there's also going to be a little excerpt for a piece called Peaches in Regalia from 1969. And this makes use of many types of electric organs and keyboards in this particular song. So I just wanted to, again, show you a couple of those excerpts. Check them out, and then we'll come back and do a review of a lot of the terms and concepts. So here we are, concept review, and we want to focus on the what and when from this lecture, as per usual with this history stuff. Know the instruments, devices, key characteristics of each, and roughly the timeline. You know, with this when stuff, you don't need to know all of these exact dates. There's a lot to keep track of, but you should be able to know the general order of when things happen, around what time periods they are, and know some of the really important dates for things like the electronic sack butt. Well, that wasn't in the 60s, but it was 1948. Multi-track recorders become prevalent in the 60s, but were sort of invented really in the 50s. The use of 4 and 8-track cartridges in 1962 and 1963 when they're invented. The Mellotron coming into existence in 1963. The big synthesizers we talked about, Moog, commercially available in 1966, as well as Buchla synthesizer, commercially available in 1966. And know some of the studios / performance spaces / festivals that we talked about. The San Francisco Tape Music Center, the Cooperative Studio for Electronic Music, Space Theater, and the Once Festival. And then outside of those things, we also need to know, of course, the who. Not the band, we'll get into them a little bit later, but the who of the different people we talked about from this lecture, as well as the when with them to some extent. Hugh LeCane, the sackbut, the electronic sackbut, Raymond Scott, and specifically with him, you don't necessarily need to know all the instruments that he invented, but know that he was, involved in producing music for commercials and jingles and that sort of thing. And he was also involved in an early version of the multi-track recorder. Les Paul is also involved in that, an electric guitar pioneer, Les Paul. Of course, Robert Moog for the Moog synthesizer, and Wendy Carlos, one of the first Moog synthesizer virtuosos. Donald Buchla and Morton Subotnick with the Buchla synthesizer. Pauline Oliveros as part of the San Francisco Tape Music Center. Gordon Muma and Robert Ashley, of course, Space Theater, Once Festival, the Sonic Arts Union as part of that as well. Of the Sonic Arts Union, in addition to Muma and Ashley, at least know Lucier, since we checked out one of his pieces as an excerpt, an example there. Minimalism, we've got Terry Riley and Steve Reich. We've got Yanis Xenakis and his stochastic music. And in the popular realm, we've got Beach Boys, Grateful Dead, The Beatles, and Frank Zappa. So make sure to spend a little time just making sure you know those names, know these devices, know some of these studios and spaces and the like, and you should be good for the upcoming quizzes.